Good day. Hope you're having a good one. This is Mark Bernstein, and we're here at Founders Forum. I'm here with Ange Honorado on a beautiful sunny day in Bala Cynwyd, Pennsylvania, one of the first days of spring. And I say good day, by the way, because I don't know when you'll be listening to this. It could be any time of day. So, again, hope you're having a good one. And to start today's show, I want to ask Ange, I think she has a thought for the day, and I'd like to see what you're thinking about. And we'll have a little conversation around that.
Yeah. Good morning, Mark. Good to see you again. And especially in the first full week that we've been together, the first full week of spring for us. And as I was driving into the studio this morning, I got a download, meaning just a vision of the word and the feeling of resiliency or resilience, one or the the And it kind of struck me in terms of looking around and saying,
That's a question for another day, but which is it?
Isn't
Resilience or resiliency?
Well, I looked it up while we were getting ready to start, and actually, I found both are acceptable. So
Cool.
I guess resiliency is a little bit more common, a little bit more current.
I like resiliency. Let's go with that.
Yeah, why not? We're kind of in 2023. We'll be current and hip.
Cool.
But I think it came to me as a thought for the day because, if we think about rebirth in the spring and sort of being resilient and things coming out of hibernation. And it also reminds me of people, businesses, our conversation we're going to have with our guest here in a few minutes around, what does resiliency look like in a business and a leader? How does it play a part in if you have to pivot the business or pivot an entire career? That's something that you and I are interested in. So, yeah, that kind of came to me and, love to get your thoughts on resiliency, and we can ask our guests as well, and just kind of the current hot seat for me today.
Well, I can tell you that if I think about my own business and career, I'm in the financial services business, and when I started out, it's a tough business. Everybody that's been in that knows, and you start out on the selling side of it. I think of myself a lot more on the consulting side of it today, but starting out, it was, it's hard. You have to create business out of the air. I also very early on had a partnership that wasn't a great partnership and had to come out of that and basically with a loss of money and start again, and have had to do things like that several times throughout my career. And there's always obstacles to overcome. And I believe you get to a certain point where resiliency comes naturally. You just expect it as part of life. It's just another. In fact, I actually like obstacles today. I like the challenge of obstacles, but it took a long time to get to that point. That's my thought about that. How about you? How's that been a factor in your working life?
I think it's definitely on the working life for my own career. I've kind of tried a number of different things as well, and I've had roles where I was doing really wonderful, and then whatever event might happen, and you kind of find yourself plummeting and picking back up and start over again. But notably, when I think about, for example, the recession, right? So I've spent my entire career in executive leadership and executive search and coaching. And during the recession, there was a massive, massive white collar, downturn. And so my business and myself even, we had to pivot. We had to be resilient and say, if we're not hiring people, how do we help them become resilient and retool themselves and rebrand themselves for new things? So I think resiliency is probably in everything that we do, personally and professionally, and I'm excited to delve a little bit deeper into that topic as we talk with our guest today, because it certainly seems like he has a very interesting story, and would love to kind of hear his thoughts on it as well.
I think that's a great lead-in. Thanks for doing that, Ange. So we have with us here today Carl Fischer. Carl Fischer is CEO and co-founder of CamaPlan, which is a company that is one of the largest administrators of alternative investments in IRAs in the country, so self-directed IRAs, which opens up a whole field of a lot of questions and a lot of interesting topics, because there's all kinds of other kinds of investments that many people aren't aware you can do in IRAs. And Carl, just a little bit of background, is a very bright guy. I've had the opportunity to know him for the past number of years, and he's a graduate of Cornell University, and he was literally a rocket scientist. working at the Kennedy Space Center in Cape Canaveral, Florida. And from there, came into this business, which we'll talk a little bit about how he got there. I just want to mention that Carl is also interested in all kinds of alternative investments as a natural outgrowth of his career, and personally has done much in the way of real estate transactions in particular, and other types of alternative investments. So he's CamaPlan, and Carl and his partner, who is his sister, Maggie Polisano, who I think we might have on if she's willing on another show at some point. They provide a lot of information and introduce a lot of people in the alternative investment space to their clients. So with that, Carl, let's talk about resiliency. How's that impacted you? And then we'll kind of go backwards and talk about your story.
I think resiliency is definitely key. And it makes me think of the quote, the old Chinese quote, "We live in interesting times." And I think we're in one of those, or coming up on another one. And I've seen interesting times over the past, 50, 60 years. So I do think you need to be resilient. But everybody listening to this show today comes from a long line of survivors. So I do think that to be in the survivors, you have to be resilient in what you're doing. So I like the word. Thanks for picking it up, Ange.
Oh, thank you.
And I like interesting times. Don't you think, Carl, we're always in interesting times? Like I'm a baby boomer, and I think about the years I've lived through, and I'm trying to think that there weren't too many that weren't interesting, but I'm sure some are more interesting than others. But what's your take on that?
Yeah, no, I mean, if you look at technology, I mean, some of my grandkids don't know about rotary phones or even the touch tone phones. Air conditioned cars, seat belts. There's all kinds of those things. We used to drink water out of a hose.
Sure.
So yeah, there's all kinds of technology changing, and there was at one point they were going to get rid of the patent office in the United States because they said that all the inventions have been made. So there was on the books at one point to get rid of that patent office. So the speed of that change and the velocity of the change in technology and laws and lifestyle has been excellent. I mean, if you think about it, almost anybody in America was living better than kings and queens, a century ago.
By the way,
Right.
you mentioned technology. I just want to mention one thing. I'd like to have a whole show sometime on words we use that don't mean what they used to. Like somebody say, if I said, Carl, I'll dial you up. I'll give you a call. Like use a dial, but then there are people that might say that don't even know why it's called dial. Or we talk about music a little bit on this show. We might talk about it later on today. What's your favorite record? But there really aren't any record. I mean, there are records, but really it's a specialty item today. It's really what are you streaming these days, or what are you? It's not DVD. CDs are almost out of date now. So it is, but we still use those words, and there's a whole bunch of them that still linger around, and people have no idea why they're there.
Yeah.
So, Carl, tell us a little bit about how you got from. Well, first of all, your background, because it's kind of interesting. I know you come from a large family, and tell us about your formative years and how you went to become a rocket scientist and how you got from there to what you're doing today.
Okay, quickly, I was born in New Jersey, but my mom and dad moved down to Florida when I was 2 years old. So I got to grow up in Fort Lauderdale. My mom and dad were in real estate, and their moms and dads were in real estate. And they started buying real estate when they came to Florida. I went to high school in Fort Lauderdale. I went to Cornell up in New York, and was in engineering and architecture. After coming out of college, I went to work for Martin Marietta and NASA on the research and development of the space shuttle program. I was interested to put man back into space I thought maybe I'd be able to get a ride if I was right there at the launch pad, hop on at the last minute. I was naive coming out of college and didn't know exactly how it worked. But at the same time, I knew about real estate. I was the one who rented the house when we went skiing in Vermont over the Christmas break. And so I just done a lot of real estate, following my dad around. He used to open up the checks or the mailbox money, as a lot of people talked about, and learned about that. But manned space flight was a lot more fun, and it was exciting, and you got to meet the astronauts, and so I really liked that part of it. And
Before you go on, I just have to say you're the first person that I've really had a conversation with to try to hitch a ride on the space shuttle. I think that's pretty outstanding in itself. So maybe your next job you work for SpaceX or Blue Origin or one of those companies.
yeah, exactly.
Anyway.
Well, yeah, I mean, I got out of that because we were starting, the rumors were on the take that we were going to get rid of the space shuttle and move to, paying the Russians for rides to space, which, really just irked me because, I like to have my own car and my own transportation. I don't want to be beholden to Uber or the taxi cabs. But anyway, so at that point, I left the space program. I did some stuff on some military satellites and some commercial space. But at that point, I left the space program and went into mortgage brokering, and then self-directed IRAs and 401ks, because I found out that I could take what my mom and dad had taught me in real estate, add the self-direction to it in the IRA world, and basically have tax-free income for the rest of my life, which increased, my earnings, by 30 to 37%, depending on what tax bracket I was in. So once I found that out, I started passing it off. Like you said, I'm one of 12 kids, so I had a pretty big network. And I was working at the Space Center, knew a lot of people and engineers there, and I would pass this information off to those people, and I helped them do it. And then finally, my sister and I started a business. She graduated from Villanova and was in data control and finance. So that's how CamaPlan was born.
Very interesting. And as I mentioned, I believe you're one of the largest companies in the country doing that, although based here in Ambler, Pennsylvania, although you're based in Fort Lauderdale, I know. Fort Lauderdale area.
Well, I mean, our headquarters is in Ambler, Pennsylvania, and I'm still there. I've always kept my residence in Florida because, again, taxes is one of your biggest expenses. And with those taxes, Florida doesn't have an income tax and never has. So that's one of the reasons I keep my primary residence here.
Yeah. So in terms of getting to where you got, because CamaPlan is one of the greatest self-directed IRA administrators out there today. What do you think? What if you could name one thing that contributed to the success you've had at CamaPlan, you and your sister? What would you call that?
I would say it's education, right? I think it's also honesty, and we set it up for investors because we wanted a company like ourselves. We're investors, so we felt that we would, this is how we would want the company run. And that's what we ended up doing is, setting it up for investors by investors. And I think that would be one of the contributors to it. Little things like we answer the phone instead of putting people on, answering machines and having to have them push 10 or 15 buttons. We want them to, get to people, things that we like.
Nice. Carl, we're going to take a short break. When we come back, I do want to ask you about your network of investors because I know that's something you've developed and you've actually even built an organization around that. So let's take a short break and we'll be right back.
Establishing a self-directed Roth IRA or other self-directed retirement plan offers access to investment options usually only available to well-connected or wealthy individuals. Anyone can build wealth and achieve tax-free income for life and financial freedom without the inordinate risk of speculative investing, securities trading, exotic financial instruments, or hoping for the best from the stock market. Since their inception in 2003, CamaPlan has come to be synonymous with expertise, flexibility, responsiveness, and diversity of investment choices. They provide innovative investment opportunities for investors seeking direct control and more choices in how they deploy their investment capital. CamaPlan doesn't just make it possible to invest in alternative assets, they also teach investors how to put their money to work. Take the road to financial freedom today. Go to camaplan.com/IRA.
Hi, we are back today at Founders Forum with Carl Fischer. Carl, as the music's playing, I just wanted to ask you a little bit more about your network of investors. I know that you've built somewhat of an organization around that in sort of a semi-formal way to communicate amongst alternative investors. Do you want to comment on that for a moment?
Sure. Well, I mean, when we started CamaPlan, we thought it was going to be easy, but a lot of people didn't know anything about alternative investments. I mean, if you were in real estate, then you knew about real estate, but all of the other different investments, gold, precious metal, notes, and mortgages, people don't know much about. So at CamaPlan, we started educating people on different asset classes, and we bring in professionals, attorneys, accountants, realtors, title companies, different professionals around the country. But the other thing we bring in is people that are actually doing alternative investments and are passionate about their investments. I mean, some people love multifamily. Some people love oil and gas. Some people like the music industry, right? Or TV or movies. So there's a lot of different investments that are out there, and we bring those people that are actually doing it, and we ask them, about their investments and why they're passionate about them and why they think they're the best investments to be in. Because everybody can pick anything they want to do. So there's reasons that people pick these things. Like, I like real estate, but my mom and dad and their mom and dad were around it, and I grew up around it. So from a risk standpoint, I think I'm more knowledgeable. And from a fear standpoint, I think I'm more knowledgeable, so I don't have that fear in that venue per se. But there's other people that have that in all the other places. So we bring in, note buyers, note makers, mortgage makers, gold dealers. So it's a good thing, and then people can listen, and we try to make it all educational and not sales. Now, people might like what they hear, and they can go talk to the people that get introduced on our show if they want to invest with them a lot of times, but that's completely divergent of us.
So, Carl, that's, I think it's very, very interesting. I know even for myself, I've just started learning about alternative investments only about 3 years ago. So, I think what you're talking about and how your company's built around educating the market as well, and really bringing some of these things into the fold and having people have access to that is really interesting and exciting, and love that you're using your platform for education as well. I'm also curious about, as you built the company, and you said, you thought it was going to be easy and you found it was a little bit more challenging. I'm interested in terms of how you built it from the inside out too, meaning because it's an alternative marketplace, so to speak, what criteria, when you look to hire people for CamaPlan, so not your clients, but employees and other leaders, what are some of the things that you've looked for? What makes them part of your culture? How have you kind of crafted that culture over the years? And what do you think ties into having you guys now have that unique ability in your business?
Well, I think that one thing that I focus on is I want our people to be polite and honest, okay? We can teach them the business, but being polite, honest, straightforward, those are things that I think are intrinsic in people. And it just makes you feel better when you're talking to them, because From the top down, we want that in our business because that's what develops trust. And we want people to trust us, and we want to trust the people that we're working with.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's especially the trust and authenticity piece. You don't have to go very far in the news these days to kind of see, companies, organizations, or things that are not necessarily trustworthy. So I think that's fantastic that's kind of a key value and core mission, of the business. So I think that's really critical and important, especially for smaller businesses, right? And I would imagine that helps you create lasting relationships and ongoing relationships with your clients as well.
Yeah, for sure. I think that's it. We've had employees that have been with us, almost since we started, and we do like to have that consistency going through. But you have to work with them as well as them working with us. But we're always trying to do the best for our clients and do the best for our employees.
Carl, we talked a bit about how you created your successes through networking with others and gathering together people and educating them, and how you find your employees. Since we're talking about resiliency today, what kind of roadblocks or failures did you run into that I know sometimes those are our greatest lessons? What kind of things that you can think of came along the way that taught you more and gave you more strength to move forward?
Well, I've always been a believer in learning from other people's mistakes opposed to mine. But obviously, you don't go through life without making some mistakes.
But by the way, I thought OPM was other people's money, but I guess it's other people's mistakes. I like that. That's great.
Well, it's less costly and less time consuming for you. You know what I mean?
Sure. Any of those mistakes you can identify?
Well, yeah, let me think. I think most of them come from lack of preparation or not enough preparation when meeting an opportunity. And sometimes you jump in too fast, or your emotions get to you. I can talk about, buying a house as an example. Oh, you really wanted that house, because it was on a point lot, and you overpaid for it. Now, is it something that's going to sink you? No, it's not. But I'll tell you a couple of other ones too. I mean, when I was launching rockets, and the lessons are the same out there. I had to put connect the shuttle to the external tank, and we took it apart, and I was using the same bolts to put it back together again because they were very expensive. And some of the NASA engineers said, "Why didn't you use the new bolts?" And I said, "Because these meet the specs." And and they brought us in to talk to the higher ups, and I actually, prevailed. But when that rocket took off, the engineer looked at me and says, "I hope nothing happens with that connection." I was fearful for, the 8 minutes that rocket was in flight. And then I'm thinking about the money I could have spent and not had that concern. But nothing happened, but it just makes you do a little bit cost analysis, because if something had happened to it, it could have killed, 7 crewmen. So I think near failures are almost as good as failures. I hope that answers your question.
That's a great one. That's a great visualization to have in terms of preparation, which you mentioned before. I just want to ask you quickly if your vision for the future for, let's see, we actually, I see we're running a little short on time. Let's get back to that if we have time at the end. I want to ask you, we do our closing rounds, just some quick thoughts. So I'm going to ask you, Carl, to shift gears a lot. I know you're a music fan. What is your favorite song and why?
I like "It's a Hard Day's Night."
That's great.
And The reason I like that is because it kind of taught me that I want freedom, right? I don't want to work 9 to 5, but that's another good one by Dolly Parton. So you start thinking about that, and it creates a vision of freedom. So that's one of my, do you really want to be spending your time at work versus somewhere else?
So, we talk a little bit about music. I'm a big Beatles fan, and A Hard Day's Night was a malapropism coined by Ringo Starr, who had a number of those. So that little misuse of words sounds like a guiding light in your life to a certain extent. It's pretty interesting.
It is, right? I mean, that was when I was in college and thinking about this stuff.
Right. Lastly, because we don't have much time left, so I'm going to go right to, tell me your thoughts about your legacy. I know you're building something special with your business and some of the education you do. What thoughts do you have around that?
Well, I mean, my legacy obviously is, starts out with my family. I have 4 boys and 7 grandchildren and another one on the way. So, life is good. That's a legacy in itself. But what you want to do is you want to teach your kids to be polite, be honest and be good citizens, and take care of their their stewardship over the earth and anything that I'm able to pass on to them. And a lot of people think it's money or buildings or things like that, but I think their thought process and how to live a healthy, freedom-filled life is what I really want to push on to these kids.
That's a wonderful thought, wonderful message. Carl, thank you so much for being here today. You've helped to satisfy mine and Angie's curiosities.
Thanks, Mark. I appreciate being here, and let's get everybody thinking about self-directing their IRAs.
We hope you enjoyed your time with Founders Forum today and you found value to take with you throughout your day. Join us again next week for another episode of Founders Forum on WWDB Talk Radio and always at the Founders Forum show page at WWDBAM.com.